Oh, well, good morning, everybody. It is your boy, Turbonius J. Chonk, here in Mukilteo, Washington. Japanese Gulch is the destination of the day. This would represent technically my third trip to the Gulch, and I'm trying a few different things out. The last time I came here, there is a 1.6 mile hill with 400 feet of elevation gain on a gravel road next to what I do believe is one of the steepest railroad grades in America. And I'm really fat. I'm way out of shape, and I rode up it in many tries with a bit of walking, to be honest, and then got completely lost in the woods on the trails. Wound up walking down what I'm pretty sure was a Black Diamond run at one point, and as much fun as it was, a little bit overwhelming. And well, I was on my first 25-mile quarter-century ride on my road bike yesterday, so today we're going to take a little bit more of a leisurely pace. After my last trip here, I bought a little Garmin Edge 530 so I could load up trail forks and maps and whatnot. And I've given myself a little 3.5 mile loop that it's going to have some pretty gnarly elevation. Going to start out on the road, but hopefully it's going to save some energy so I can actually enjoy myself. And now I have a GPS, so hopefully I don't wind up getting lost and having to walk. But I've got my other cameras with me, so you can join me for the adventure, and we'll check in and touch base and see how this went by the time we're done. So, for the time being, Chonk out. very wise cartoon dog once said, you gotta kind of suck at something to get good at something. Or the first step to getting good at something is kind of sucking at it or something, but you know, I don't take too much advice from cartoon dogs. I take a lot of advice from cartoons of other anthropomorphic sorts. But I'm gonna have to take my own advice this time and maybe work up to these blue trails, man. I am 2 months into the journey, very fat man, way out of shape. This is a beautiful area to be in, but I got a good tip from another rider out there. There's flowy trails on the east side of this place, and I don't know, this seems to be the tech side of the tracks, so I think I'm gonna hit up Little Mountain a couple more times, get a little more accustomed to the flow trails there, maybe try one of the other non-mountain bike course trails, and stick to putting the miles in on that roadie before I come back. This is my local mountain bike park, but hoo-wee, comes with quite the steep price of admission. You know, the hills. Anyway, folks, thanks for checking in again. Stay tuned. More adventures to come, and sorry we didn't see the sky today.